Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to do my magical readathon wrap up. I'm going to talk about the books that I managed to finish during the month of September while I was participating in G's readathon. If you're stumbling across this video and you're not sure what that is, I will link my TBR video and G's intro video in case you're interested in joining us in the future, because this is something that's going to continue on for a while, it seems. So my original TBR had 5 books and I managed to read 4. The only thing is, 3 of those books were actually from the original TBR that I told you about. I ended up listening to an audiobook as well that I slid in to fit one of the stops on the Novice Path. So, Novice Path? Novice? Whatever. So yeah, I read 4 books, but only 3 of them were from my original TBR. So I'll just go in order of how I finished them to talk about them. The first one that I read was The Line Becomes a River, Dispatches from the Border by Francisco Cantu. This is a nonfiction book. Francisco joined the Border Patrol on the US-Mexico border, and this book is a memoir of that time, and this was written very, very well. Like on the back it talks about how he was a winner of these different prizes, Art of Justice Fellowship, former Fulbright Fellow, and if you're judging it just based on his writing, yeah, I can understand why he would be winning awards for his writing, because I think it's really well done. And the formatting of this book was one of the parts that I liked the best about it. It's broken up into 3 parts, and you kind of get the before he joins the Border Patrol, why he was interested in sort of his first days, first months, learning about what it's like to be on this job. Part 2 is he's been at the Border Patrol for a couple of years and he decides to take a desk job, so he's working sort of a different side of Border Patrol. And then part 3 is after he decides to leave and sort of his interactions with immigrants outside of that idea of Border Patrol, and once he sort of knows how the system works from the inside and how that affects his point of view now that he's out of it. Other than the Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, there are no chapters. Each part just has little snippets. Sometimes the snippets are only half a page, sometimes they're a few pages long, and it's just different stories. It's almost like he was just jotting things down in a diary to remember for later, not usually particular dates or anything. But I found a lot of the stories of him on Border Patrol were really compelling, and maybe that's because my idea of and what I know from the Border Patrol is kind of limited, so to get those individual stories and experiences I found really engaging. The only parts that I didn't care for in this book was he does have snippets where he talks about dreams that he's had, and it sort of mirrors his journey in the Border Patrol, sort of that feeling of like, okay, this feels a bit bad, like I don't love what I'm doing, but I'm here to sort of study it and see how I can make it better, and how those dreams become worse and worse over time as he becomes more embedded and more kind of sucked into that culture. And I never like reading about dreams, so I didn't care for those snippets in the book, but otherwise I flew through this book. And part of it was because the writing was so good and the little snippets were so compelling, but also just because of the format of the book. It's so easy to read a couple pages, look, see a couple more paragraphs sort of split up and say, oh, I can read a little bit more, I can keep going, it's fine. I definitely recommend it if you're interested in this book. I gave it 4 stars, but this is like a really solid 4 stars. Like I'd say like a 4.25, maybe even a 4.5 now that it's been a couple weeks since I finished it. It's really fantastic and definitely worth your time. The next book that I finished is actually that audiobook that I mentioned that wasn't part of my original TBR. I listened to The Wildlands by Abby Jeannie. I believe it is Abby Jeannie. I was saying it Abby Janai in my head, but I believe the audiobook narrator said Abby Jeannie. So this is a literary thriller, and so I had this on my list of books to check out for a really long time, and I was just looking for something that would be kind of fun but was fiction, maybe a little bit deeper than that. So because literary thriller, I was like, okay, this could be good. And it follows a couple perspectives, but it's about a family that lives in Oklahoma, and there's 4 kids. They live on a farm. Their mother has already passed away and they live with their dad. And there is a Category 5, an F5 tornado that comes through and just completely destroys their farm and a lot of the town that they live in. And the 4 kids managed to make it into this really intense storm shelter that their father had built underground, but the father does not make it in and he passes away. They never actually find his body, but of course the kids just have to assume that he has disappeared with this storm because it killed all their farm animals, completely destroyed their home. And that really breaks the family apart. There's 3 sisters and a brother, and the brother, Tucker, doesn't take this very well. He ends up running away. He's 17, so they don't really do anything about it. And so he runs away, and we are following the family for a while from the perspective of Cora, who's the youngest sister, and then also Darlene, who's the eldest sister. There's a middle sister as well, but we never hear from her perspective. And it talks about how they have to kind of survive, the 3 of them. I mean, it is a literary fiction, so there's a lot of descriptive writing and a lot of getting into those the characters' inner thoughts. What adds the thriller edge of this book is that Tucker, a few years later, eventually comes back. The thing is, Tucker has been radicalized while he's been gone, and he's become sort of an eco-warrior, someone who will do basically anything to keep people from destroying the planet or killing animals or keeping animals in zoos. And so he has come back a different person. He loved animals before, but now he's been radicalized. And Cora always loved her brother, and she missed him so much when he left. She was 6 when he left, 9 when he comes back. And Tucker really uses that relationship that he already had with Cora and that love that she has with him to sort of convince her to come on this journey with him and help him sort of save the world and take down these bad guys and everything. And so that launches into another side of the story that adds that thriller element, because you know something bad is going to happen. It's just this underlying uneasy feeling throughout. And so you're following Cora's perspective when she goes off with Tucker, and then you're also following the eldest sister, Darlene, and sort of what she's going through, coming back and realizing that her youngest sister has been kidnapped essentially, but not completely. I mean, Cora's 9, so she can't really make those decisions on her own. But I thought that this was really quite good. I gave it a solid 4 stars. I was expecting something good, but it was definitely impressed me a little bit more than I thought it would. I was really sucked into that thriller aspect of the story. I thought it was very cool, a little different. Like, I haven't really read anything quite like that, that literary thriller genre where it mixed this particular type of thriller situation. There were definitely parts where it felt a bit slow and the writing was a bit too much for me, but that was definitely the literary side coming through. Anything to do with the thriller side really worked for me. And the ending, like, there was some really intense moments in the book. I was a bit surprised by how intense that it got, especially the ending. This isn't a super well-known book. I feel like it had a bit of buzz when it came out, but people haven't really been talking about it that much in the grand scheme of things over the long term. So I would really recommend this book, though, if you're someone who enjoys literary fiction or you enjoy that thriller aspect mixed in with something else and you're just kind of looking for an interesting blend that sort of kind of explores the mixing of the genres in a nice way. I would definitely check this book out. The third book that I finished was Campfire Stories, Tales from America's National Parks, edited by Dave Q and Alyssa Q. This is a collection of stories for 6 different national parks in the US. Those stories can be nonfiction or fiction. There's also poems, there's Native American legends in here as well, and there's also sort of the general overarching plot, I guess, of Dave and Alyssa sort of traveling around to visit these different parks because they decided to basically do a very extended road trip and go to these parks and collect stories in each of them to put together to make this book. This couple had fallen in love with Acadia, and because they had spent so much time there, they started thinking about what sort of stories existed in that area, in that place, and so that was what birthed this book. For the stories themselves that are in here, I'd say I'd give it 3 stars. There's a lot of poetry, which I don't care for. There are Native American legends for each of them, and I think that was really great that they did take the time to find stories that were native to that area. Sometimes it was a lot easier than others, depending on the particular movements of the tribes in those areas, or if they were still there, or if they had been kicked out. But I like that they put in the effort to do that. There were some stories that were just people who had lived in that area for a long time and were reflecting on it, and those could be good or bad. It depends on if you like their writing. And then there were a couple stories that were more my style, a little more intriguing. And so I did mark off my 3 favorites. There was a story for the Rocky Mountain section called The Legend of the Blue Mist, and that was like the perfect creepy story to tell around the campfire. I mean, this is called campfire stories, and a lot of these stories I wouldn't necessarily read around a campfire, but that one would be one that I would try to read. There was another one for Zion called The Great White Throne, Has It Ever Been Climbed? And that was like an old-timey mountain rescue story. So someone went mountain climbing in Zion and had to be rescued, and I think it was early 1900s when the story was taking place, and it's a true story from what I understand. And so that was kind of cool to see how it went back in that time versus nowadays, where you would have had like helicopters and all this extra stuff to try and rescue people. And then there was one poem that I liked, and that was Summit Fever, which was almost like a slam poem. Like the way it was laid out on the page, it really helped you read the poem as I feel like it was meant to be experienced, and it was a poem that would definitely benefit from being performed. So those are my 3 favorites from this bunch. As terms of the actual book itself, the design of it, that's what pushes this up to a 4-star for me. This is a beautifully designed book. It's a naked hardback. These little drawings correspond to different stories in the different sections in here. So at the beginning you have a little fire, and then at the very end of the book on the last page, it's like the fire has gone out. You know, you stopped telling those campfire stories. And it's little things like that. At the end of each story, there's a little about this story, so you can learn a bit more about the context of why this story was put in here, who the author was, if there's an author, or more about the Native American tribe that the legend comes from. So in that sense, this is really well done. I do think it would be a good gift for somebody that is a fan of the national parks like myself. This is just something that looks really nice on the bookshelves, and even if they don't read every story in it, or if they don't like every story in it, there's something in here for everyone. The last book that I finished, I started on the first day of the readathon and finished on the last day, and that is The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. This is the chunky book, which is why it took me so long to read. It also took me a bit longer to read because the beginning of this book is a bit slow. This is one that's super popular, so you've probably heard the synopsis of this even if you haven't read it, but it does follow 2 sisters in France who are experiencing World War II. The book starts sort of at the beginning of the war before the Nazis come into France, and then it finishes just after, as the war is ending. With these 2 sisters, they react to the war very differently. They have different ideas about how they want to deal with World War II, deal with the Nazi invasion, and you follow the story from each of their perspectives. This book has a lot in it, and you follow the story through a number of years, through a lot of character growth, a lot of hard choices, and really devastating moments. I think the plot, the characters, the setting of this book was excellent. There's a lot of different characters in here, a lot of characters that you could love and hate. There were a couple moments where I feel like the author kind of took things a little too far with how she was describing some of the bad people and using like the fact that they were fat as a negative trait. So something that when this book was published, I feel like people were just starting to say, you know, maybe we shouldn't equate fatness with being evil. So that was in there a little bit, but it's very minimal. I did find that this book took a long time to really get into the good part of the story. I'd say it was about 150 pages before I got to the point where I couldn't really put this book down without saying, okay, I really want to keep reading, but I need to go to sleep, or but I need to work. In addition to that slower beginning, I also found the final chapter to be a bit too melodramatic, a bit too perfect. Interspersed every so often, there are chapters set in 1995, and it's from someone's perspective, and you're not sure who it is. And so at the end of the book, you find out who this person is, whose perspective you're hearing from in 1995. And the way she wrapped up the story, there was one thing in the final chapter that I really would have liked her to have kept, but there were a few other things that I wish she could have removed, and I think it would have made the final chapter more impactful without just being melodramatic and just too perfect. This is a book that's taking place during a very intense time, during war. It has lots of dark moments. There are definitely going to be things that are uncomfortable to read. They were uncomfortable for me to read. So if you still haven't picked up this book yet and you're still thinking about it, just go into that knowing that there's going to be times where you feel uncomfortable, and you could maybe look into some of those trigger warnings a bit more. But there's a lot in here to love, and I think it's one of those books where even if you have to push through that first 150 pages a bit, by the time you get to the end, the reward is very sweet because you've spent so much time with these characters and you want things to work out for them. It was worth it in the end. I gave it a 4.2 out of 5 stars. Those are all the books that I managed to read. There were 2 that I did not get to, which is The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman, super shiny, and The Children's Blizzard by Dave Laskin. These are books that I now have to read before April of next year when the next part of the readathon happens. These were the character creation books, or 2 of them, so I didn't need to read them right now, so that's why I sort of focused on the other books instead. So set these aside for another time. As far as the path prompts, I completed Mist of Solitude, the Ashthorn Tree, and then I did complete Obsidian Falls. That was my personal bonus one that I got with the audiobook. And then for the campfire stories, that was to confirm the heritage of my character. So my character is a fire earthling. If I read these 2 books, then I'll at least complete the background and the province for them, but that can be done in the future, as I mentioned. I did also follow along with the question portion of the path. So I followed it on Twitter, and it was basically, here's this scenario, here's 4 options. Which one would your character choose? And I kept track of that, and then I watched G's video last night to find out what guild my character is going to be in, and based on the answers that my character made, I am in the Order of the Crescent, which I'm actually really happy about. I liked the design of their sort of symbol the best when I saw it pop up on the screen, and then yeah, that does seem to be generally the one that more people are in. I mean, there's somebody in all of the guilds, but this is the most popular one so far, but fine with me. I love the colors, I love the symbol, I love the sort of special things that you get with being in that guild. Can't wait to see where this readathon takes us in April of 2022. I'm really excited to follow along in this journey. If you participated in the magical readathon, let me know how it went for you. Let me know what guild your character ended up in, so maybe some of you are also in Order of the Crescent. If you have anything to say about the books that I read, feel free to do that as well. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.